Now, and we are live. Peace, 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 and Black Power family. Welcome to another episode of Do Knowledge Radio, place where knowledge is born. This is your host, Knowledge Born Law, and we got the dynamic dream team in the building today. You see what I'm saying? We got Shot Town and we got Yisrael in the building. We got the Shy Yisrael connection going down.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we got our Morehs in the building. We definitely on it. It's been a long time coming. We putting this thing together and we welcome them back to the microphone. Our Moreh and our brother Nasik. So, you know, get your pen, your pad, strap your seatbelt in. You know what I'm saying? Tell your neighbor to tune in. Tell a friend to tell a friend. We on live. We about to get busy. So because my honor and privilege at this time, introduce some of the other brothers, Moreh and Nasik Yosef are in the building.
Peace, peace. Knowledge, my brother.
Peace
My
and
brother.
What's
blessings.
going on?
I appreciate the love, bro. Hopefully, we'll be able to make some history with this show. I'm really excited. I got my little brother Nasik Yosef. You know, I brought some reinforcements. Top soldier in the house. We're gonna lay out the history of the Hebrew Israelite movement and attach it to Dimona, and then we're gonna have a discussion about our projections for the future and how we see this movement and Dimona moving in the future. So I appreciate the love, knowledge always. Appreciate the relationship. It's been wonderful. So I'm gonna let my brother Nasik introduce himself to the family. Do the Knowledge Radio.
Thank you again, my beloved brother Kananya, Moreh Kananya. Brother Knowledge, I want to greet you and your listening audience in the words of peace. Shalom alaikum, assalamu alaikum, and black power for black people. It's an honor and a privilege to have this opportunity to grace this microphone so that us three who are in pursuit of freedom, justice, and equality, those who are in pursuit of sovereignty, in pursuit of creating a paradigm where we know that we can justly govern ourselves without outside interruption nor influence. So this conversation for me is much more than just us coming on this platform to pontificate, but it's us coming to implement the necessary stratagems that must be used for our people to invoke their freedom and to protect their freedom. So I don't see this as a small thing. So again, brother, it's an honor and a pleasure to be here, to be in this time, to have this understanding, to be amongst brothers, to be amongst real men who seek truth, freedom, and justice and equality for our people. And we know the only way the whole planet is going to have peace if we, the black man and woman, is returned to our proper place, position, and understanding. So again, I thank you for this opportunity. I want to give way to you, Brother Knowledge and Moreh Kananya, and at the appropriate time, I will come back on and give my piece and my dissertation. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Well, the early beginnings of the Hebrew Israelite movement began during the time of slavery. It started with individuals like Deandre Vesey, who he was the founder of AME Church, of the AME Church in 1818. He allegedly led a failed slave revolt in 1822. And the slave revolt, how he got the slaves to revolt is that he used what you call black liberation theology. He was a radical preacher, and he began to teach the slaves that they were the new Israelites and the chosen people, and their oppressors were going to be punished for enslaving them and their treatment of them. So when we talk about the history of the Hebrew movement, the person that comes to mind initially is Deandre Vesey. Now he's not traditionally viewed as the first Hebrew Israelite preacher, but he is the person who sparked the movement. He was the person to make that connection between us and the Israelites by reading and going through the Bible. Now, to kind of give an idea of his Black liberation theology, there's a book called He Shall Go Out Free, the Lives of Denmark Vesey. It was written by Douglas Egerton. In the book, he references points of Denmark Vesey's Black liberation theology. How was he able, what was he talking about? How was he able to spark this slave rebellion? Well, he says literally all of Vesey's numerous religious pronouncements were drawn from the Old Testament in a very real sense. Vesey and his disciples turned their back on the New Testament of the New Testament God of love, fashioning a theology of liberation that fused the demanding faith of the Israelites and the sacred values of Africa. Sacred values of Africa. He used the faith of the Israelites and the sacred values of Africa. Now, this is significant because not only can you look at him as a person who sparked the Hebrew Israelite movement, but you see here also, he also is sparking Pan Africanism with the slaves. He's making that connection with Africa. So you can see that this first Pan African Hebrew ideal is beginning to emerge with Denmark Vesey. Now, the Black liberation theology of Vesey, it represents the genesis of the movement that inspired people like Benjamin Pap Singleton, Bishop H. Turner, Prophet Cherry, and William Crowley. Benjamin Pap Singleton, a lot of people don't talk about him, but he was a very interesting personality in the 19th century, Black personality. He established his own community. He left the South and established a community in Kansas. And this community was the precursor to what is called the Black Exoduster movement. He is the person that sparked the Black Exodus movement. Now, the Black Exodus movement was a movement of slaves moving out of the South, which they saw as oppressive, and moving into the heartland of America, which is the Midwest and Kansas, that area, Missouri, and they were settling in the land, and they began, and it was a spiritual movement. They felt that they were like the Israelites moving from Egypt into a new promised land. So Benjamin Pap Singleton, like Denmark Vesey before him, began to use Black liberation theology to create a better condition for his people and help them fight their oppressor. So he used it to spark the movement, the Black Exodus movement. And I mean, we're talking about 50,000 settlers that settled in Kansas. Oh, shit. Oh, shit. Oh, shit.
I just bear with me. But now, see, can you hear me?
I hear you now. I hear you loud and clear now. It was choppy at first and very distorted, but I hear you now.
Okay. I said, did you have something to add until Brother Moreh gets back on the line with us?
I can, absolutely. He spoke about some of the prominent African Americans who we humbly feel in their works and their teachings were the foundation and the springboard for the Hebraic movement. And I just want to give some clarity. Though we use the construct of Hebrew Israelite, we're not talking about anything that's separate from those who are seeking freedom, truth, justice, equality. So when you look at the parallels of a Denmark Vesey, a Nat Turner, a William Crowder, Bishop Turner, these great men who have represented various different backgrounds, religious perspectives, or just approaches in their pursuit of freedom, the one uniting front was that collective thinking that, hey, we as a people have to change our circumstances and produce the reality that we know we so justly need. So we can't look to our oppressors. We can't look to those who profess with their mouths to want freedom for us or to want freedom for themselves, but are unable and unwilling to do what it takes to implement that freedom. That's what Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, these great men represented, to my humble opinion, the greatness of God, because they were willing not just to die, but to kill for the pursuit of freedom. And now you can say, hold on, brother, that's kind of harsh. What God did you serve that says killing is a prerequisite? No, any means necessary is a prerequisite. And those who oppose you from being free without you being an agitator or the aggressor does not have that right to life if they try to stop you from living yours. See, those are commandments that are put in scripture, Torah, or Quran. You have the right to self-preservation. So we're saying, as we look at history and we get Moreh Kananya back on the phone, let's be real circumspect about what's taking place. Because as we go chronologically through this history up into the present moment, though we may have not taken physical lives from people, the spirit in which we approached our freedom was exact and the same. We know that we had to kill the niggitudes, the cowardice, and the arrogance and ignorance of our people so that we can acquire freedom. So it's not a journey where everybody's going to be on, brother, nor is it a journey that everybody's going to understand. But those, as the scripture says so profoundly, have the ears to hear, let them hear. Those who have eyes to see, let them see. And we know that we're speaking to a very small number of people because we know the mentality of the slave master that has impregnated our hearts, our souls, and our minds to keep us in perpetual servitude, disregardless if there are bonds and chains on our wrists and ankles, that we're not able to acquire our freedom. So I want to give way because it seems that we have Moreh back, but I just want to give that context as we go through history because we're talking about freedom for all people. We're using the Hebraic understanding and vehicle to illustrate our point, but it's just connected to the Nation of Islam. It's just connected to the Pan African movement, any nationalistic movement that wanted freedom for our people, because we, as Hebrew Israelites that's stationed in Jerusalem, we had never isolated ourselves or never intentionally isolated ourselves from the family at large. We want to institute and bring into existence a world that all of our people can be free. This is just the vehicle that we used.
I apologize, brother. I had to switch. My phone battery went out. I don't, man, it's charging. It still went out. But I appreciate you, Nasik, for filling in for me.
Absolutely. It's
I'm
spiritual
gonna
warfare, brother.
continue where I left off. I'm gonna continue where I left off. I was talking about Benjamin Pap Singleton and the Black Exodus movement, Exodusters movement, which was in the mid to late 19th century, and he was using the Black liberation theology of Denmark Vesey to forage a a new promised land, which they believed was America's heartland, which had not been fully settled. So they felt that they could settle that land and really make that really a sovereign land. That's what the intentions were. It was unsettled land. People like Benjamin Pap Singleton and others. You got Black Wall Street. They were settling those areas in intention of one day branches off and making that sovereign territory. But it didn't happen. Benjamin Pap Singleton, after some time in the movement and the settlements, really didn't. They really never really fulfilled their potential. He got frustrated and he became a Pan Africanist. In 1885, he he moved from Kansas to I mean from a small town in Kansas to Kansas City, and he started to preach Pan Africanism. But he started off with the black theology, and he influenced his teachings influenced a person named William Saunders Crowdy. Now, a lot of Hebrew Israelites know who Crowdy is because Crowdy is really he's generally referred to as the first Hebrew Israelite leader, just officially, even though the movement he was influenced by people who were teaching this type of theology, so to say, spirituality before him. But he founded what you call the Church of God in Christ, also in Kansas. That's how that's how we know he was influenced by the Black Exodus. Probably his parents were Black Exodusters who believed that that land was the promised land and began to identify with the Israelites, and that's probably what sparked his ideas. In 1896, Saunders said that he had a vision, and he said that blacks were descendants of the 12 lost tribes of Israel. And that's how the church was founded. And this is really one of the early beginnings of what you call the Hebrew Israelite movement officially. Now, after Crowdy, if we're going through a timeline of history, we'll know in the early 20th century, the Great Migration occurred. Now, the Black Exodus movement was the really the beginning of the Great Migration, but scholars and historians usually don't tie it together. First, they began to move into America's heartland, and then when that didn't work, they started to move into the cities of Chicago, Detroit, and New York in the Midwest. And this was considered what you call the Great Migration. And in this era, we see the history of the Black nationalist movement. So here comes Garvey and the Noble Drew Ali and the Nation of Islam not too shortly after. Garvey started, and and I want to tell the history of the Hebrew Israelite movement because I'm leading to Dimona. And in doing so, I have to kind of tell the history as it is in 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 uh in succession going to Dimona, because the Hebrew Israelite movement has so many different strands, like in New York and in different areas in Virginia and different places. But I don't want to get too caught up in trying to explain every piece of the movement. So I'm going to tell the history going up into going up to Dimona, and in doing that, I have to go through the history through Chicago because that's where it all started. So we see Garvey in 1920. He established the UN. He established the headquarters of the UNIA in Chicago. In 1925, the Noble Drew Ali moved Moorish American Temple of Science to Chicago. He claimed that Chicago was closer to Islam. That's why he moved his headquarters from the East Coast to Chicago. Chicago began in the early 20th century became the headquarters for many black nationalist movements. One movement that's really never really discussed is what you call the Abyssinian movement. The Abyssinian movement is directly tied to the Garvey movement. It's directly tied to the Abyssinia is another word for Ethiopia. Now, the Abyssinian movement was not a structured organization. Like it was a network of small organizations. They all had a common doctrine. The leaders were most of them were Garveyites or members of the UNIA. They they possess what you call they possess like a dual citizenship because they were part of the Abyssinian movement. They were Pan Africanists, but they also were Hebrews. They identified with being Hebrews, and this is the genesis of what you call the African Hebrew Israelite. If you want to go, this is the genesis, the Abyssinian movement that started in the 20th early 20th century. Even before Garvey, the Abyssinian, I'm sorry, even before Garvey, the Abyssinian movement started in Chicago. But when Garvey got there, there was kind of like a marriage. And then when the Garveyites, when the UNIA kind of uh, when it weakened, then the Abyssinian movement kind of went on its own. The first Abyssinian leader was a person named Rabbi Hassan. He's the founder. I don't know if you guys know who. Well, I know Yosef know. Now you know who. Um, wow, his name just Rabbi Funedi is. But his church was founded by Rabbi Hassan. Rabbi Hassan, it goes all the way back to 1915. That's when he established the church. It's the longest. It's the oldest official Hebrew Israelite temple in Chicago, and it's called Beit Shalom. That's in Chicago. And I know Yosef has been there, but Rabbi Hassan is the founder. Now, Rabbi Hassan is not really connected to Crowdy and all of the black theology, which is interesting. He comes directly from Ethiopia, supposedly, allegedly. We know that he was foreign. Some people say he was from Ethiopia, some places, other places in Africa. But what we know is that he was an African Jew, quote unquote. He identified with being an African Jew in that terminology. So he founded that church, and he taught that blacks were Israelites, that the black people in America were Israelites. The presence and the ideology of Rabbi Hassan and his congregation became more known through it was a Jewish philanthropist named Livingston. He went because Hassan was so secretive. He really ran the temple like a Masonic lodge. You had to be initiated. He really didn't trust people. So a lot about him is not really known. But he did allow this Jewish philanthropist to come and interview him one time. And this is a lot about what we know about him is through this philanthropist. And with his um, through his report, he reported that Hassan kept all of the Hebrew holidays, Sukkot, uh, Yom Kippur, Pesach. He ate matzah, so he became officially recognized as the first real Hebrew rabbi, black rabbi in America. So this is and his beginnings is in Chicago, and this is before Rabbi Wentworth and Rabbi Josiah Ford. If people are looking at it from the New York perspective, Rabbi Hassan predates them. Now, the black Orthodox Hebrew of Rabbi Hassan was originally a black Israelite Hebrew theology in Chicago throughout the 20s, 30s, and even the 40s. So from the 20s to the 40s, this type of Hebrew Orthodox rabbinical tradition was the Hebrew Israelite movement in Chicago, mostly. The Crowley and
and all that really never penetrated in Chicago, even though I think a lot of Rabbi Hassan's members were influenced initially by the black theology coming from the South. And when they came to Chicago through the Great Migration, they identified with what Rabbi Hassan was saying, and then they adopted this more orthodox or less tradition of the Hebrews. One of the people that was influenced by Hassan was a person named Louis Casey, Prophet Casey, in the 40s. He was a housing janitor, uh, and he began to identify as an Israelite, and he started what you call the Israelite Bible class. Israelite Bible class started in the late 50s. He Casey purchased about 100 acres of farmland in what you call Ulin, Illinois. Many of the members of the Israelite Bible class they relocated there from Chicago, and by the 60s, the Israelite Bible class had developed a small farming village. They was producing soybeans, wheat, and corn. So if Casey not only took on the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, but he began to have what you call millenarianistic aspirations of going back to the promised land and actually moving away from uh, what you call society. He wanted to move away from America, but he didn't feel that the people were ready to move out of America, but he wanted them to first go and learn how to be sovereign. So he took the people to Ulin, Illinois, and he started the Israelite Bible class. And so they never reached America, but here's the clincher with Casey. One of his students, of Prophet Casey's students, was a person named Lander Bowie. Now, Lander Bowie is Vietnamese teacher. So this is the connection. You see, you see, Casey was talking about the end of the world. Let's leave Chicago. Let's go and start this community. Let's learn how to do the farming, and let's prepare to go to the promised land. And then here comes he never his congregation never made it out of Illinois though, but he did inspire a person named Lander Bowie, who what for a minute was his main reader and visited Illinois. Now Lander Bowie is the individual that first introduced Ben Ami to the Hebrew Israelite way of life, which is significant because it is now you can see what we was able to accomplish, what Ben Ami was able to accomplish, really has an origin. You know, these ideas have an origin and an evolution to them. And you have to go to Casey. You got to give him that credit. You got to go to Bowie, and then you see when Ben Ami's there, he's getting all this, and man, he took it and he made it happen. You know, so Lander Bowie was Casey's reader for a minute. He was influenced by his teacher. Ben Ami meets him. He becomes a Hebrew Israelite, and then we have a Beta, the Beta Cultural Center. Now, Ben Ami, Lander Bowie, and a few Prince Gabriel and a few other people, they established what you call the Beta Cultural Center. Now, they intentions of this Beta Cultural Center, which is on the south side of Chicago, was to bring all the Hebrew uh, camps together. Because by the 1960s, there were different Hebrew camps all over Chicago and even New York. The Beta Cultural Center, Ben Ami and Lander Bowie, they wanted to bring everybody together and, you know, create really a national unity amongst everyone. And in this process, uh, 1966, Ben Ami has a vision that it was time to return the children of Israel back to the promised land. Now, Beta hadn't even it had not even existed more than a couple of years. So, and Ben Ami had not been much into the quote unquote truth, but a few years. But he he said the angel Gabriel came to him, and that the angel Gabriel told him it was time to return home. And what I'm going to do here is I want to give the audience a chance to hear directly from the words of Ben Ami. So I have an article here. Well, it's not an article; it's an interview with Muda Baruka. If you don't know who Muda Baruka is, he was a Rastafarian, popular Rastafarian um, from 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 Jamaica who visited Ben and me in 2000. I think it was 2003. Did an interview with him. So I got the interview, the transcripts. So I want you guys to hear the words of Ben and me himself when he talks about his vision that he has. So it says, at the time, I was in the initial stages of sharing the truth with our people. Certainly, we had been influenced by our environment. I certainly did not expect my any vision. I was like Ezekiel or Moses. I felt that if, in fact, the angel had a message, it had to be for someone else. Possibly he had the wrong address. Nevertheless, in understanding if if in fact this was a message from Yah, when I did speak the words, it would certainly have to come to pass. I was reluctant because the Christian environment in which I was familiar with. So I wanted you to hear the words of Ben-Ami himself as he expresses the vision that he had. Now, the vision, he has the vision. I mean, and he gets to work immediately. He begins to organize an exodus from Chicago to what is called Liberia. Now, if you don't know the history of Liberia, Liberia was established by the American Colonization Society. What we're talking about, maybe 100 years, over 100 years before Vietnamese vision. So, and it was created by the United States and American Colonization Society as a refuge or a resettlement for free men who wanted free black men who wanted to leave America. So Liberia was set up to be a place where if blacks did not feel welcome in America, they were free to go. Unfortunately, a lot of us never took advantage of it, and some people never trusted it because it had been constructed by the Americans themselves. So we never really utilized it. But Liberia became a sanctuary prepared by Yah for the community when we needed it because we used it as a safe refuge before we went to Israel. So I'm going to I'm going to go in. Hold on one second. Okay. So in going to Liberia, Ben-Ami was able to organize about 350 followers, and they settled in Liberia. They built a community there. Um, Here's one of the words from one of the community members in talking about his experience in Liberia. We chose to stay there about 2.5 years in order to get rid of the foolishness of America before making a way to the land of Israel. To make a person born again, to die from the hell we came out of, to get rid of it, to learn to get rid of the hate, to get rid of the bitterness. Liberia was always conceived as a place where we would learn to be righteous. Those of us who wanted to do the right shedded off the hate and came home to Israel. So for 2.5 years, the 350 people from a beta who Ben-Ami was able to organize lived in Liberia. They lived through very difficult conditions, living in the jungle. Uh, and if you ever heard the story, there was driver ants, there was snakes, they were living in tents. It was a very harsh condition. Many of the people who lived in Liberia for those 2.5 years, they did not make it to Israel, right? Because it what happened was for 2.5 years they lived in Liberia. Then we moved into Israel, and this is where we see the beginning of what we call the KOY, the Kingdom of Yah, in which people see today. Now, out of those 350 people, I have a mark here too from Benjamin. Hold on 1 second. Okay, here it is. I'm reading from the interview again that Benjamin did with Mudu Baruka when he's describing moving from Liberia to Israel. He says, as a matter of fact, I was very poor. I was a part of the Beta Israel Hebrew Culture Center. There was an organized structure, however, there was no finances. All of this is part of the great miracle, and it gives us the assurances that the Holy One of Israel has in fact been a part of this redemptive struggle. In the beginning, it was actually an impossible journey. We would have to leave America in 1967. We had an outer perimeter of the time that we had to sojourn to Liberia. Here he says 3.5 years because he's counting when the first official group came in, and then to journey on to be in Israel before the Day of Atonement, 1970. We were into a country with an annual average income of $100. We were not allowed to take jobs. We had to move into the interior of Liberia. As I said, without going into minute into minute detail, it was literally an impossible journey. As we look back now, we see how everything worked out. How the Holy One of Israel did assist in creating the environment. He did not assist us in making that journey to Liberia. He did assist us in making that journey to Liberia. We were practically supposed to be stuck in Liberia. There was no practical way for us to get out, but we did sojourn there for 2.5 years and then did find our way unto the promised land in Israel. How many people went to Liberia? How many people made it to Israel? This is what Muda Baruka is asking. He said 400 individuals went to Liberia and a three-fourths dropped out and went back to America. 109 souls arrived in Israel in 1970. That's probably the right date because it's probably the first people came in the first group in 1969. A group of black people coming into, so as you can see, the Liberian spiritually, it was only like 100 people coming in initially to Israel. So what we see now with thousands of people here in Israel started off with only 100 people. Now we go into how did the community evolve here in Israel? Now, from 1969 to this 2020, we managed 100 to about 3,500 people, I would say. Now, initially, there were waves of people coming into Israel. There was waves and groups coming into Israel. The first wave was the 100. Then a couple of years later, there was two couple of more hundred. But what really uh, initiated the growth of the community is when Ben-Ami took a trip back to Chicago and he met a person named Nasik Shaliach. Nasik Shaliach had been a Hebrew uh, leader in Chicago even before Ben-Ami. He had his own printing shop. He was known in the Hebrew Israelite movement. He came out of the Church and God of Christ. So he was already an established person. Ben-Ami went there. He actually it's called fishing. He was fishing for soldiers. He fished Nasik Shaliach, and Nasik Shaliach brought in a pretty important uh, group of men that would really make the community what did you see today? People like Prince Asiel, who is the father of Nasik Yosef and my father-in-law. People like Hagi Bor Ben Kael, who is considered the nation's hero. People like uh, Sa'ili Akeem, who's a minister in the community. There were a lot of important individuals that came from not the stock of Nasir Shaliat, who he brought in, and it really made the community grow. Maaba is the important person in explaining this history. But when they came in, the community maybe doubled or tripled in size within a couple of years. They were able to, Maaba initially, when he came in, they established this is the beginning of what you call the princedom, the 12 princes. They established the government in, I think it was 1971 or 72. It started with 12 princes. Uh, Shagrir or Prince Asiel was one of them. Prince Shaliak was one. Benami was a prince. And that started the government in the beginning of Dimona as we see it today. From there, the 70s, uh, they were beginning to, there was a lot of back and forth to America as they were setting up businesses. They were bringing more people in. They were they were doing anything you could for revolution all throughout the 70s. And in that same time, the doctrine of the community was being developed by Nasik Shaliat and Ben Amin. They were developing the doctrine. They were taking a lot from the elder statesmen or the older Hebrew, the black theology movement that I was just discussing. They was taking a lot of ideas from Denmark Vesey. You want to go to Crowdies. They were taking a lot from the people who had started this before them, and they created what you call kingdom doctrine. And we're going to talk about that. I'm going to let Yosef talk a lot about that extensively. I just want to lay out a history and a timeline so you'll understand how the community came to be and how it connects with the movement in general. So we fast forward throughout the 70s, it was a very struggle. There was a struggle here in Israel. Uh, there we did not. Initially, they did give the first 100 people status, but after that, we the people here had no official citizenship. So they resided here in Israel without proper medical care. They did not have any support from the government at all. So they would have to completely rely on each other and their own uh, ingenuity. And people like Prince Asiel and Ben-Ami, the leaders, were very, very crucial during that period. If it wasn't for their great leadership and the decisions that they made, the community would not have survived, and that's a fact. So we definitely have to commend the founding fathers of community for keeping this going when it didn't look like it could survive. So in the 70s, it was very tough, and also Nasir Shaliak and others. In the 80s, it was, especially the early 80s, there was a major tension between the community and the Israeli government. In 1978, there was what you call the Glass Commission, which was a commission organized to find out really an inquiry into the community by the Israeli government to see if there was uh, it was really an inquiry to see who these people are and what should we do with them. And that sparked a lot of controversy, and the struggle really became a political struggle with Prince ICL and the international staff having to do a lot of geopolitical things, uh, have to really play in the field of geopolitics to stop either the full deportation of the community or or everybody going to jail. Whatever the Israeli government was planning on doing, the geopolitics of the international staff, they really were crucial during that time because the community was a sitting duck. And in 1985, it escalated to the point where the Israeli government actually did surround the compound or the kafar with with armed soldiers and tanks, and they were threatening to arrest everybody and deport everybody back to America. And also during that time, at the same time, the international staff who was fighting on the geopolitical end, using black congressmen and whoever that was involved in the U.S. government to fight on our behalf, uh, they they were dealt a heavy blow. And this is where Nasik Yosef is going to talk about his father, Prince ICL, and what happened in 1984 and 85. In that time, what happened to the international staff, and how did that impact the community and the great victory?
Thank you so much, Brother Kananya. I want to start off saying it's important for us to understand that of all our studies, history is the best qualified to reward our research. That's important because, as my brother, my friend, and my teacher, Moreh Kananya, was able to so succinctly walk us through that timeline up until this point, again, not just giving you the history of the Hebrew Israelite movement, not just giving you the history of the kingdom of Yah, which is stationed in Jerusalem, Israel's history. He's giving you your history because it is essential for you to understand what took place in its totality so that we can have a clear and distinctive vision for the future. And most importantly, must understand what's taking place now. But let me be not remiss in my duties and my responsibilities. First and foremost, giving all honor and praise to the creator of the heavens and earth. We thank that great God for all of the messengers, prophets that he has sent through his scripture. I am certainly grateful and honored to be able to read of such distinguished divine servants of God, whether they be female or male. But surely if I can thank that great God for those men and women I know only from scripture, only from studying, I must surely be humble enough to thank those he sent in this dispensation in time. So as my brother said, the Denmark Veseys, the Nat Turners. We look at those Bishop Turners, William Crowdies, those great men of valor, Noble Drew Ali, Marcus Garvey, the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, his students, Malcolm, Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, and those who came out of their guidance and teachings. I want to thank personally our spiritual leader, Ben Ami Hamashiach, that great master who was able to move on the vision, even though, as the Moreh said, he questioned even the value of himself to be able to carry out such a monumental task. We thank him for Nasi Shaliach, that great master teacher who was the one who taught and trained us internally how to understand scripture and prophecy. And surely, my father, if I say, and I tell unto you this day, if those two were able to form a spiritual child, it would most certainly be Prince Isiel ben Israel, because he was the one who took the message of Ben Ami Rabi and Nasi Shaliach, their teachings, their training, all over the planet to be able to awaken, lift, and inspire our people to look back to Jerusalem, not as a religious orientation, but as a form of governance that we may have to be truly free, self-sufficient, self-governing, and autonomous. So I greet you again in the words of peace and blessings, my beloved brother, Brother Knowledge, Mother Moreh Kananya, and your listening audience. The point where we are today, and excuse me, I also want to say so many heroes and sheroes, heroines that I wasn't able to make mention. I would be on all day, but nobody is left out of the work of God who fought on behalf of our people and gave and sacrificed themselves to be able to create a reality that we may be free and have the understanding and knowledge that we have today. But I want to say, in regards to the case of 1985, which my brother Moreh made mention to, this is such a significant time because as he spoke about the Glass Commission, from that report, from that investigation of our enemies, they had determined, though it was not made public knowledge, but those who were able to read between the lines came to the agreement here in America as well as in Israel that this community of blacks returning back to Israel to establish themselves as a sovereign, because as my brother made mention to, but I'll go a little detail, we were considered persona non grata, meaning that nobody was authorized from the Israeli government to help, aid, or assist us. That means we could not get jobs, we could not get health care, we could not get proper education based on their systems. So everything that we had to do of consequence had to be done internally and from the external organization of the community that was moving, helping to bring in resources to help supplement those brothers and sisters who were here or in Israel on the home front holding down the fort. This is monumental because we did not get any, and I want you to understand this, any aid and assistance from the Israeli government the first 15 years up until that point, but it's really the first 20 years up until 1990 where agreement was made, and we'll talk about that. And all of the victories, all of the triumphs became from the determination and grit and the ability to understand that we were not going to be victims anymore. Turn to Israel and establish themselves as a sovereign without the help of any European. My father, Prince Asiel, who was the international ambassador at the time, was moving all across America, establishing relationships with black politicians, mayors, spiritual communities, nationalistic communities, and grassroots people who wanted freedom for our people. Though they may have not connected to the spiritual connotations of the Hebrew Israelite, they understood the mission of freedom for our people. So they gave and lended a hand in whatever capacity they could to help fortify our people in Jerusalem. Now, this did not go past the intelligence agencies of America, whether it be under the Department of Justice, the FBI, whether it be under the Department of the Secretary of State and the CIA, the Department of Defense and the NSA, all of these organizations that were put into place to keep their main focus was to keep us under their feet and to make sure that we never rise to the position of prominence again. And so you would think that while all these intelligence agencies, these governmental institutions of America, these police forces putting so much time and energy in such a small group, because we were able to galvanize the sentiments of freedom amongst our people, not just here in America, because I spoke of the NSA as well as the CIA, which we know do not deal or supposedly deal domestically with American affairs, but they deal internationally. And because of my father's efforts under the teachings of Ben Ami and under the teachings and guidance of Nasi Shaliach, was able to establish relationships all over the continent of Africa. In 1974, going to the 6th Pan African Conference in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, being the only black supposedly from America who had verified credentials because we represented the nation and was acknowledged by the other African nations at that time who were gaining their freedom. Went into Liberia, as Brother Kananya Moreh said, went into Ghana and Benin, to Togo, these places, and established relationships and started to create trade. Now, this is the beautiful thing, why this is so important as I get into the court case, and I'll be quick in this, but I want to give context. We were like the messenger of the Nation of Islam, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was establishing trade internationally. Now, America and the European nations of the Western world has put a stronghold on international trade and commerce. So when you see a black group of men who are under the banner of truth and God to start create on their own relationships with other African nations who were just gaining their freedom and coming out of colonialism of the 18 and early 1900s, not under the banner of being Americans, not under the banner of being even Israelis, but being the nation of their own, the African Hebrew Israelite nation of Jerusalem, and then to be able to bring in such necessary products as gold and silver and diamonds, we again was coming an international threat. And so as we got up into the 1985, there was a case that had been put together by the FBI and a joint task force to incarcerate, starting with my father, Prince Asiel, and 30 other members of the nation, our community, the Hebrew Israelite community, to arrest them. It was a crackdown. And so they incarcerated those 31 individuals. And this was the same time that in Israel, we were facing mass deportation because it was also assault on both ends. They wanted to destroy us internationally as well as nationally inside of Jerusalem. And so it's a monumental day in our history that we speak about continuously because it showed our strength and our courage of 1985, which we identified as the day of show of strength, when 5,000 Israeli soldiers had approached our community, which we call the Kifar, the village of peace, and tried to remove by force every member of that community. And in protest, we were scheduled to march to Jerusalem. And they knew if we, this community, with our babies, with our women, with just bags and a couple of hours worth of food, were willing to march from Dimona, which is in the southern part of Israel, up into Jerusalem, which is in the central, more northern part of Israel, which driving in an automobile can be easily a 2-hour drive. We knew it took at least 24 hours, again, with newborn babies and women and a number of other elderly that was willing to make this journey, that would cause a national and international reaction that was unprecedented to that time. And they didn't want that type of bad press. So they thought they were going to frighten us into capitulating to their wills and then deport us. But on that day, we stood strong with our priesthood, which we are identifying in Hebrew culture as the Kohanim, in front of those guards and said that you don't have no authority nor no might over us. And the God we serve will make us not just victorious, but will ensure our victory into perpetuity. And so that type of strength put fear into the soldiers. And we have it documented through video cam because we have one of our brothers put his what we call Jake clothes, which is just regular European garments to kind of blend in with the news reporters who came down from Tel Aviv, which is the capital of Israel, as well as Jerusalem, and their different news media outlets. I'm sorry, one second, let me close the screen. With their media sources, and we were able to record their trepidation and their fear, and ultimately they rescinded on our community, never to come back. And at the same time, my father was locked up, and when he got message that the Israeli government was in the action of removing our people from Dimona, his utterance from the cell when he was interviewed was that we will never leave that land. No matter what, we will never leave that land. Now, this is important. This is a man who was facing 365 years, RICO and RICO conspiracy. And those for your listening audience who may not know what RICO conspiracy is, or the RICO Act, was a law that was put into existence from the 1970s to incarcerate or to entangle the mafia bosses of the Italian and Russian and Jewish mobs because they were untouchable. But they knew that if they could correlate any crime that was done by anybody under those major crime bosses, that they will be able to arrest and implicate the leader. And so that was the charge that they brought on my father. And that's why they were able to get, in their eyes, justifiably, a sentence of 365 years. And so though he did not cause any crimes himself, because other brothers and sisters may have done things in the pursuit of freedom that was against their rules, against their laws, against their ordinances, they thought it was justifiably going to arrest our people and destroy our movement. And so when my father was brought to stand, he told the juror when they brought him over the charges and read everything that he was charged on in the court, his response was, I did everything that you said. So his first position wasn't, no, it wasn't me, or can we make a deal? Can I rat out somebody else so that I can get a lighter sentence, or that these other people, I can tell you what they were doing? No, he said, I take full responsibility. He said, but you're not going to charge me as a petty criminal. You're not going to charge me as a thief that was self-aggrandizing, who was trying to get personal wealth for himself. He said, you must charge me as you charge those in the Revolutionary War who threw the tea in the Boston Harbor in the act of revolution. You got to charge me as the way you charge Martin Luther, who protested against the Catholic Church starting the Protestant movement. He said, I am in that vein and in that ilk. I am fighting for freedom and salvation of my people. So if you're going to charge me for anything, charge me for fighting on behalf of my God and my people. And because of that prominence in his voice and that authority that he pursued and exuded with his comments, his sentence was reduced to 30 years. Now listen to this. He was convicted on 30 years. And when he got convicted again, the brothers and sisters, some of them, their faith was shaken. They didn't know what was to come of this. It was a lot of uncertainty in the air. And so he went inside himself and prayed and asked upon the God what will come of this. And his response was that you are going to prove to the world the power of Yah Yisrael, or the God of living, or the God of life, and the God of creation. And he told the brother who actually was the father of my wife that we're going to be out in less than a year. Now, he couldn't fathom that idea. They just got convicted for 30 years. That's a life sentence for a 40-plus-year-old man, because we know, especially in the 80s, that the life capacity, expectancy of a black man was 58, 60 tops. And those were someone who was in better health. So they didn't think he was going to live to see 70 to be able to get out of prison. And during this whole time while he was in jail, he was able, through the efforts of some of the brothers and sisters that were in Washington, D.C., to galvanize support and to create protests and bring the necessary notoriety of what was taking place and what had happened in that courtroom, because they shielded off to reporters and to the public. They tried to keep this as private as they possibly could, because they did not want to incite any revolutionary spirit amongst our people by the stand that was taken and the acts that were produced by these righteous and noble men and women who just wanted freedom. And because of that, the attention that was brought to the case, they were able to have an appeal. And during the appeal, again, the prince brought such an authority. He brought such a position of power and a certainty, never fearing not one moment that he was going to spend the rest of his life in jail, was able to be in a position to overturn that 30-year sentence, a conviction, and also free everybody else that was incarcerated with him. And to show the power of standing on truth and having integrity, Brother Knowledge, the FBI prosecutor who spent his whole, it seems to be, life mission was to make sure that my father never seen the light of day, as well as those other brothers and sisters, who was hell-bent on finding any piece of evidence, almost making up certain evidence in a lot of cases, because we went through the documents to try to proverbially nail my father to the cross, end up becoming his personal lawyer. The judge, who was a black man, though, was the most conservative judge in the appellate court in the whole DC district, never, ever in his recorded history favoring the defendant, was able to, at the end of the appeal, after the prince and the members of the community had got their conviction overturned and they were set free, he said, you are no longer, he was talking to my father, just the ambassador for the Hebrew Israelites. You are the ambassador for all people. So take this message of truth and spread it all over the planet. He said, if I would have known what I know today, I would have been on trial with you. So these type of victories, again, proves what we're saying. It's not spooky, Brother Knowledge. We're not trying to get into no esoteric, religious, hocus pocus type of conversation. We're talking about having a power, having authority, staying true to your morals, staying true to the principles, and staying true, most importantly, to truth. Letting truth gird your very loins. And then you will be able to bear witness miracles, or what this world thinks is miracles, and make it into fruition. There's no obstacle, no impediment, no blockade that you can't overcome if you stay and hold fast to truth and be able to be critically intuitive enough to overcome those situations and obstacles. If man puts you in it, that means you have the capacity to overcome it. So, brother, I thank Brother Moreh Kanaya. I want to give back way to him because I know he still has more to present, but I just wanted to give that quick synopsis as it relates to the trial of 85. And there's so much more to it, but that is such an instrumental historical fact an event because our people know nothing of that. But it was the only time in history that a revolutionary was facing such charges and not able to overcome it, but able to free everyone from that case and walk out in a matter of 9 months after being convicted. And we didn't even get into the reality of why he was incarcerated. He had access to the warden's office, was able to make calls each and every day, and had vegan meals because they were vegans being brought into the jail to feed him and the brothers. So this is the power that we say that we serve, the God that we serve. Again, not being spooky, but we just dealing with truth. We're dealing with the reality of things. And that's the story and narrative that we want to put out because it's your history as well. Once you know it, you have the ability to use that power to benefit your freedom because all of our freedoms are and intertwined. So, brother, knowledge.
I'm here. I'm here. This Moreh.
Moreh Kanaya.
Man, that was perfect. And you definitely articulated that crucial moment in history in the mid 80s of what was happening on the international scene and what was happening in Israel and what the founding fathers were able to overcome and the great victory that they was able to achieve that made I what I believe it made this community eternal. What they was able to do was such a great victory that I know for a surety that the community and will exist in this land forever and ever. And that was the great victory our fathers had, and which is going to get us to the third section of our presentation. Where do we go from here? Now, after 85, after the great victories both on the international scene and on the national scene here in Israel, the community and the Israeli government, uh, there was some relations developed, and we were able to get uh, temporary residency here in Israel. Things began to open up for many of our brothers and sisters who were here on the front lines. They were able to get jobs, and we was able to support ourselves and build the community, um, further build the community. The 90s was a very crucial decade for us. Everything was expanding uh, here in Israel and both on the international scenes. Our businesses were developing, whether it be in the food industry, in clothing, merchandise. Everything began to open up. By 2000, we had gotten to a point where we became well known on the international scene, whether it be in Africa, in the UK, and throughout America. And we were able to develop some relationships through the international staff, through Prince ICL and his international staff, that that put us really, it really put us out there as the premier Hebrew Israelite community in the world. The most we were in the 90s and the early 2000s, we were the face of the Hebrew Israelite movement, hands down. That was hands down. Um, by 2000s, early 2000s, we were able to bring in some notable entertainers like Whitney Houston. Even in, I think Stevie Wonder came in the 90s. We had, and there was a lot of more. There was a lot more entertainers came through here. People like I know Barry White was here. I don't know if he came to Dimona.
He
There was a
did.
lot of actors, and there was a lot of people coming through and seeing what we had developed, hearing our story. We had began to really develop the vegan food industry with the restaurants. We revolutionized vegan food, um, and so it really took off in the 90s. In the early 2000s, we were at the apex of the community. That's when I came in around 99, 2000. I mean, the community was really, really moving at an extremely high level. Um, then it became, once we got the citizenship, we kind of got into the system here in Israel, and which led to our children going into the military. And that kind of opened up some more doors from us. I forgot about the school that we developed in the early 90s. I think it was in 92 or 93. We had got a grant from the U.S. government to develop our own school called Beit Sefer Akva, which is uh, still a community school. So I forgot to mention that in '90. So we had the school by the early 2000s. We had had our own school for almost nearly a decade. Kids were going into the army. Again, our businesses were expanding. We were bringing in notable personalities. Uh, Bill and me had authored. I mean, by the early 2000s, he had authored maybe 14 books. God, the Black Man in Truth, God, the Law of Relativity, the Messiah into this world, Everlasting Life, Yesh, Yeshua, Jesus the Christian Christ, Yeshua the Hebrew Messiah, or Yeshua the Hebrew Messiah, which is a great, excellent book for anybody who is trying to understand the historical personality of Jesus. That's an excellent book. There's even a part two to that book. Yosef has it all. He's showing off his library, I see. But by the early 2000s, we were the premier Hebrew group in the world. We had very well established scholarship, developed our scholarship body, which was initially started in the 70s with Prince Shaliak, who had developed that institution. He developed um, the School of Prophets, who we had our own institution to develop our own scholars. So we had we had a lot of scholars in by the early 2000s that were very well polished. We were doing tours for major personalities, whether it be entertainers, whether it be government officials that were coming here in the land. We had scholars that was able to take them around the land and show them the hidden African presence that has been here for thousands of years. We were the first to do that. Anybody doing that now, they really owe that to the scholarship body coming out of Dimona, because we were the first people to show the African presence here in the Middle East, and which is something that I, very very much interested in, because my I'm a historian and I deal with the African presence here in the land. So that was one of the things that captivated me in coming to the community, just the scholarship in itself. And it wasn't this, like he said, this spooky scholarship. These brothers and sisters were well taught. I'm reading right now, Yosef. I'm reading Dr. Shaliak's book, um, From America to the Promised Land, which I know you don't have. I got it. I'm reading it now, and I've had this book for almost 10. I had this book almost 10 years, and I just picked it up like with the last couple of months since the quarantine. I'm so impressed with Nasi Shaliak's writings, his ability to write. I mean, I'm so impressed. I mean, it's phenomenal. Like, this man had access. I'm trying to figure out how he had access to all this information, and if it wasn't the information age yet. Like, how he had access to materials that, I know in the 1970s wasn't easy to get. His library had to be extensive. So that's just to kind of give you a glimpse of how developed and how smart a lot of a lot of our scholars in our community were. They weren't just preachers like that. These men knew how to write at a very high level, very intellectual, gifted personalities. So in the early 2000s, we was booming, and then there was we had some challenges. We had some challenges within the last 10, what was it, 10 years, 10, 15 years. There's been some challenges. And we haven't fully recovered from those challenges yet. Um, and we're going to speak on it. One of the challenges we had was the split with Prince ICL and Ben Ami. And that's why I had Yosef come over here and talk about that history, because a lot of people who have been being introduced to the community now, you know, they don't know about Prince ICL. They don't know. They don't know. Everybody who's been in the community know, but a lot of people who just being introduced to the community may not know who Princess Aziel is when he was the face of the community before 10 years ago. And so his bringing Yosef here was also, I wanted to make sure we have historical edification, to make sure we edify the history and make sure we tell it the right way. We have to include him because he was a major piece in that. And the reason why people may not know who he is just learning about the community today is because there was an issue. And we're not going to get into details with the issue, but we'll talk about the ramifications of the issue. And the ramifications was that there was a split. And it wasn't split down the middle like that. It was a Malcolm moment in our community. We had our Malcolm moment. And, I hope this doesn't offend anybody on either side, but the best way I can articulate it for anybody who want to know what happened, or who just learning about the community, who never heard of this person, that person, is that we had our Malcolm moment, and it really kind of set us back a little bit. It was definitely a gut shot into the community. And that Malcolm moment happened with Nasik Yosef's father and my father-in-law, Prince ICL. And I mean, it really set me back personally, and it set a lot of other people back. And then the second setback we had was with the transition of Ben Amin. That was another stumbling block for the community that we had to try to recover from, because that was another gut shot. Definitely unexpected. Um, Ben Amin, I mean, I mean, he was, I wouldn't compare him to Dr. Sevi, but when it comes to this vegan diet and health and nutrition, he was up there, you know. He, in fact, I mean, there's no comparison because he built his own community, vegan community, so he had, I mean, there's really no comparison there. We were all vegans. Ben Ami had been a vegan for at least 40 years. And I watched this man work out, do everything to the letter when it came to health and fitness. And so when he passed in transition was a major setback for us too. But um, trying to overcome that, I mean, we dealt with the Prince ICL issue. Then we had Ben Ami passing. It was some major challenges, which brings us today. Right now, the community is still functioning. Right now, it's just not at the level in which I know I mean, I was there in the early two. It definitely not functioning at that level. And this is not a criticism for anybody, but what we want to talk about, what I want Yosef to talk about, brought him in. I wanted to hear the ideas from Yosef of what he think, where should we go here from now, based on some of the challenges that we've had, and how do you see the community in the next 50 years? So I kind of laid out the history. Again, I'm just going to lay out the history of what transpired. I want you to articulate what do you think, and what directions do you think that we should be going in?
I thank you, Moreh Kananya, again for those beautiful words and that thorough history. I want to apologize to your listening audience if I may get a little bit too passionate. You have to understand that this is all that I do. This is all that I think about. I'm consumed by it. And so the passion isn't me being overexcited or trying to compensate for something that's not there. It's just when I get to talking about something I love so thoroughly, it just brings that side out of me. And in particular, when I was speaking about the triumph of the trial of 85, I'm a direct product of that. When my father was released in 1988, he met my mother, who was a Muslim follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He met her in what was the Final Call building, which was the former meeting place of the Nation of Islam here in Chicago, Illinois, the headquarters of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And he met my mother when he was giving a speech there, and they had friends that were in high school together. So they met that way. And then eventually, even though he was not seeking another wife, got married and then produced myself. I was born a year later. So when I look to that reality and all of the power that was present in him during that great time, during that great test, and for him to spiritually and biochemically put that inside of my very DNA, it gives me a whole nother feeling and sensation. So as I'm about to speak about said subject matter that my brother alluded to, and he can attest that I'm not speaking from a position of ignorance, nor am I speaking from an arrogant position that I may know better based on some superficialities. No, I've been training at this. I've been sitting at the feet of great men. Whether you may think they're great or not, they have proven themselves through their work, through their study, and what they were able to produce in their own lives for themselves and for their members, for their families, for our people in whole. Such a wealth of knowledge and information in institutions that has put me in a position to accurately and unbiasedly assess the missteps that we've made due to a number of circumstances, but to correct them. I am a student of Benjamin, and that's why I was showing the books as my brother was naming them. That again, scholarship is not something that we take lightly nor for granted. But I'm also a student of Brother Dr. John Henry Clark. I am a student of Cheikh Anta Diop. I'm a student of Jacob Correttas. I'm a student of Dr. Yosef Yakinen, or we say in Hebrew, Yochanan. See, I've studied these men. Ivan Van Sertima. I've read their literature, not seen them on YouTube. Dr. Amos Wilson. Read their books in detail to try to equip myself with as much knowledge and information and perspectives that I can so that I can succinctly approach this systematically and not just off bias or incomplete knowledge. So, as brother said, what is the best approach? Well, first we have to realize, and we're on this COVID-19, and I see it's in the title, and we're hearing this word epidemiology a lot, and the epidemiologists and the study of diseases. But we know the greatest disease of the black man and woman is nowhere near COVID-19 or any other man-made RNA virus, but that of white supremacy. The greatest disease that we have has perpetuated in itself, self-perpetuated, the ability to not trust one another, the ability to have disdain, to be dishonest, to be unloyal, to never have integrity when we deal with each other as men. See, this is the prevailing problem of our communities that not allow us to go forward. Because I can't honestly say that I can offer something that we haven't already done. We've already created avenues of finance. We've become masters of finance. So it ain't just getting no money. We've become the greatest intellectuals that you can possibly think, whether we've been trained in their institutions or whether we've been self-taught. So we can't just say it's information. We have some of the greatest orators the world has ever seen in the history of time. So it's just not about speaking. So what is the approach that we're missing that won't allow us to overcome this last stumbling block? As my brother said, as we relates to Prince ICL and Rabi, and I'm using these as examples, but they're representative of a greater evil or a greater misunderstanding. Let me say that. I don't want to correlate evil with those great men, but a misunderstanding that we just haven't been able to really resolve within ourselves. And so I want to read something from this book, and it was Everlasting Life, Beninese book, but he was quoting Dr. Owens, and he wrote in 1991, Crisis in Leadership. And it's going to give context to what I'm about to say. Whatever structure a leader is functioning under, he or she functions within the parameters of that structure. The only way to maintain themselves and progress within that structure is to seek the interests of that structure or system. This is true whether in politics, music, economics, or social structures. There are laws that govern the system. Black leadership is trapped in the system. So again, it's not just, for me, a system of economics, of politics, of socially, but it's a system of perpetuating self-hate. So we're saying that the problem isn't the system or our ability to matriculate in that system. We have to destroy the system. And the precept that we have is that somehow, because we may converted to a different religion, or we may have moved somewhere else in the world, or we may come into another understanding, that those rules don't apply. It's like thinking that because you're in Africa and not in America, that the laws of gravity don't apply to you. No, those laws are universal. It's the same thing about truth. So we're saying that the first thing that we must do, especially as Black men who aspire to not just be leaders, but to be fathers and husbands, must get back to being principle driven. Yes, this COVID-19 has proved a number of factors of where we're lacking in. We don't have proper infrastructure. We don't have the proper food systems and cultivation of food that we can feed ourselves. We haven't got serious about education, even though all of us have intellect and knowledge, but we haven't created and institutionalized our knowledge where we're able to teach without somebody else lording over us and telling us what the curriculum that we must give our young people to sustain and to perpetuate their freedom. We have to create the proper healthcare institutions that we can really teach health from a holistic standpoint and not just from trying to pass off medicines, which we know are poisons. You see, but you can't approach none of those things with a pure and clear view until you remove the hate. And that's why I said we got to get back to principles. What's the principle that we're trying to unite on? What's the foundation of truth that we're united on? Do we have ethics? Do we have integrity? Are we able to keep our word and make our word bond? See, those small, we think, and minuscule things that we've overlooked throughout time is the greatest building block of any people. If I say I'm going to do something, I have to be able to keep my word and do that. If I'm going to be a participant in the redemption of my people, I have to be held accountable to my aspect and my job in that reality. I can't be looking at my responsibility, and I may be the sweeper, and that's the job that I chose. But I'm looking at the speaker, and now I want to be the speaker. And so now I'm not only not doing my job to the best of my ability, I'm envying somebody else and trying my best to usurp them and replace them. And so now we have contention amongst the brothers. So we got to get back to brotherhood, Moreh Kananya. We got to get back to brotherhood, brother knowledge. We got to get back to brother and sisterhood and understanding the real interpretation of family. Again, the listening audience, because that is the key to our salvation. And then we become codified. No, we ain't always got to agree on everything. No, we ain't always got to be buddy-buddy and hang out with each other. But we have a code that we live by and we honor no matter what. No matter where I'm at on the planet or what my personal relationship may be with anybody, I'm not going to do anything that is directly and indirectly going to harm them. How can I do that? And that's my brother, whether we doing the same things or not. But I know him being in a position of power gives me power. See, now I have somebody that I can draw when I'm in need, that I can be lifted up when I'm down. See, these codes that we say we talk about and we understand and we believe in are totally void from the reality that we operate under. So yeah, I can come on here and pontificate and give various answers to things that we already know are blatant. You don't need me to tell you that we need hospitals. You don't need me to tell you that we need to grow our own food. You don't need me to tell you that we got to educate our own children. You don't need to tell you that we got to separate from white people. You don't need me to. You already know that your life bears witness to that. But we need to bring back to the forefront, again, the reality of having integrity, that the reality of having principles, the reality of being a keeper of thy brother. I want to read one more thing, and I think, again, it's going to tie in exactly what we're saying. In this very book, where's my book at? I got so many. I apologize, brothers and sisters. It's called The Resurrection, From Judgment to Post-Judgment. And it was another book that was written by Ben Ami. And he talked about the ecosystem. And he said, when you take something out of its natural ecosystem, you can bring to extinction the inhabitants of that system. See, when we removed truth, when we remove love, integrity, principles, honor, respect from our ecosystem, we have brought on the decay that we see today, that we can go down the street and see death being so rampant amongst our communities. I don't care if you go to the best part economically and the most influential and affluent of us, they still hold on to that decadent mind that allows them to perpetuate a mentality that is not serving of life. And that's why you see, like, how we got all these rappers, all these basketball players, all these football players, but they're not able to galvanize and create institutions with their money and their resources and their widespread influence to bring in some type of freedom for our people, because their minds is off. We don't understand the psychological damage that's been done to us. We attribute everything to the physical, but we don't know it's been a severance in our brain, in our heart, in our soul, in our gut from truth. There's not a connection there. So those of us who have this understanding, we got to reconnect and those severed ties so that we can start again, send that electric signal of truth so we can operate on the right paradigm and the right frequency. Listen to this, brothers and sisters, and I'll be done after this. And I'll give way to any questions. And it reads on page 36 in that book, and the chapter is entitled Ecosystem. A faulty mind will leave man's internal organs in the same state as his rivers, lakes, topsoil, underground springs, air, and ozone. And we know currently, the state of our environment, of our ecosystems, physically. Our social environment and society, a social order structured where there is a binding relationship between all parts and persons, would be resoundingly affected by the loss of these vital eco processes. Such understandings as honor thy father and thy mother, love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you, things we can live without, are the elements that make up a life support system. So we've been contextualized to think we can live without those things. Oh, you ain't got to honor and respect your mother. You ain't got to care about your brother. We know in these cities, in Chicago, that you don't even know your neighbor. You don't know who lives right next door to you. In most cases, especially in these more urban areas. That wasn't the frequency when we said we was coming out of slavery or in this Jim Crow South. Everybody on the block knew each other. It was a level of respect, a level of communication, a level of protection. See, we have deteriorated under the false pretenses that we're progressing. And we'll tell somebody that we're doing better. We made it. Based on what? It goes on to say, Yah, God, or that eternal existence, however you want to characterize it, it says, breathe into our nostrils the breath of life. We inherit the relative characteristics defined as the breath of life. But if we inadvertently or purposely estrange from these characteristics, it will bring about our death. So that's what I want to say to the audience today in reading that we have really committed suicide. We're bringing on our own death by having a disconnect on the fundamental understandings of being principally driven, having morals, having integrity, men not afraid to represent a masculine perspective. See, this feminization is such more diabolical than we understand, because if you bind the strong man, you're able to rob the house. And so we see physically and spiritually, that our house have been robbed on all levels. So I'm pleading with you, my brothers, and those in the audience, that we have to come to a point where we're able to unite on truth. You don't have to agree as me, and I don't have to agree as far as those little nuances. You want to call yourself a Muslim? That's fine. I'm a Muslim too. You want to call yourself Hebrew? But I'm saying that's not the point I'm trying to make. Are you a righteous son? Are you representing the meaning of those words? So we can connect on those similarities and build on truth. Because either what we're saying is true or it's falsehood. But if it's truth, if you can concur with what I'm saying and agree with, then we have to intelligently and strategically move forward to bring this into reality. Because again, we're dealing with an adversary who wants to wipe us from the face of this planet. And you're saying, well, they're not going to be able to kill every black person. Of course not. But it's a spirit inside of us that they have been doing a wonderful job at dismantling. And that's the essence of who we are. That's the essence of our life. And that's what they are putting in extinction. That's why it's very few men who are able to stand on truth. Yeah, you have some who are articulate. You have some that can play the role. But do they have morals? Do they have principles? I have to go back to that point, because we got to drive that in going forward. Because what type of world are we offering our children? What type of example are we giving these young sons and daughters that's being born into this world? And we see them fall into this decadent behavior. We cannot be participants in this deterioration. We have to build based on truth. And so that's all I want to say now. If there's any questions, we can definitely go forward. But I'm going to close on this last point. In the scrolls, the secret truth scrolls, Benjamin said, let me open my iPad because I want to read it verbatim. And this goes for all of us. That a mind that cannot discern truth is disqualified from receiving the help of God. The access to proper knowledge is the prelude to power to change your thoughts. And when you're able to change your thoughts, you're able to transform your environment and understand your purpose. You can judge a tree by the fruit it bears. So thank you.
That was plain. That was plain. Hey, knowledge on. Well, I think the way you articulated that, we definitely have to get back to just the basics of brotherhood. That's what launched this community in the beginning. That's what solidified things throughout the 70s and the 80s. That's why I gave y'all the history and show you the great victories of this community. These victories was built on brotherhood, really. It was built on trust. It was built on loyalty. It was built on passion and love for one another, love for our people. And we definitely have to get back to that mindset that we all we got. We all we got. As soon as we begin to believe in the opposite, that's our fault. When we think that we could take an organism out of our ecosystem and our ecosystem could survive, we in trouble. Because that's why that what you were reading about the ecosystem is so important, because anybody who studies biomes and biology understands how ecosystems survive or how they operate. If you take a a, a organism out of an ecosystem, you could destroy that ecosystem in years. Whether you take away the ants, or you take away the worms, whether you take away a plant, you could destroy that ecosystem, because everything is calibrated together to work together in enhancing life for each of for all the organisms. So we got to look at our community. We have to look at our nation as our people, as an ecosystem, and value one another and understand that each and every one of us are vital to each other's existence. So, man, that's brotherhood at its highest level. That's scientific brotherhood. And that's what I think from here on out, we gonna use the doctrine of scientific brotherhood and understanding the science of brotherhood, because that's a science in itself. And we're gonna develop that, Nasik, because our people gotta, our brothers and sisters gotta understand it. Because as soon as we begin to think that we ain't all we got, we not all we got, and we start trusting in people other than our people, then we in trouble. We in trouble. And that's the message. That's the message. And that's what you were articulating. And I just wanted to add on to what you were saying. If Brother Knowledge is here for any questions, we'll answer any questions
Absolutely.
that he
I
has.
want, no, I'm sorry. I didn't want to stop you, brother, but I just want to, again, I got to give credit where credit is due. My father, going back to that court case of 85, gave us the example for what we're talking about now, spiritual brotherhood, when he created the universal brotherhood. And it was something that we implemented in the community, universal brotherhood, universal sisterhood, where irregardless to what you were spiritually or what you were connected to, we had to have an affinity and love and connection to each other and look out for each other because we still brothers and sisters in this fight. And it's a premise that in prison that you have to adopt for survival in various different ways. You have to create a brotherhood, irregardless to what other things you may have been accustomed to. I know that brother, though he was on 63rd and we on 59th, and we may have been beefing, but when we in here, we gotta unify because it's greater forces that we may have to face. So I'm saying that type of understanding that we gotta build on this scientific brotherhood. So I thank Prince Isiel for that initiative, but we gotta build on it. What all the brothers and sisters who've given us this knowledge, this wealth of information, this examples, we just want to take it and build on it. That's it. We're not coming to destroy, disparage, or disregard anything that is beneficial. But intelligence say things that are not advantageous, you have to let go. You got to let it be like this chaff in the wind, as the scripture says. You let it blow away. And that's what we're doing. So, Brother Knowledge, I give way to you and Moreh and Nasik. And again, all the brothers in the chat and sisters in the chat, shalom, shalom, peace, peace. Beautiful comments, and we appreciate everything.
Man, you're wonderful.
I'm in class like everybody. I'm trying to get my information and my learn on, taking notes over here. You understand what I'm saying?
Hey, I was taking those too when Moreh was speaking. So.
Yo, you know what I'm saying? Y'all calling me back. I'm over here trying to guard the door. They like, hey, you got any questions? I'm guarding the door to make sure no cowards and eavesdroppers, no interlopers and Decepticons come up in here. You understand? So I'm doing my duty and taking notes at the same time. This is a powerful discussion. It's the first of its kind for me here. And, I consider myself pretty astute in regards to, our story. You see what I'm saying? In our sojourn. So organizationally, you see a lot of these things have happened, and there's so much intertwined that's there. When you get into the intricacies about this interconnectedness, we don't move no other way than a universal brotherhood or sisterhood. Move no other kind of way. We haven't. You see what I'm saying? Um, some things we got to know that some of our ancestors were sitting in the same room with each other. You see what I'm saying? And they were given assignments and given quadrants and given tasks to do, and they did them in the best manner. You see what I'm saying? And some of that wisdom from one generation to the next was imparted on some of our ancestors' way out. So there were certain things that happened, particularly here in North America, that took place that many of us don't have a lot of information on. So I'm very thankful to be able to kind of put these things things together. And I'm thankful that this platform was chosen because you could have done it anywhere. You see what I'm saying? Could have done it anywhere. And we go back some years in regards to being the voice of Zion and doing the voice of Zion radio show, and hearing that sojourn. Like, this is like a lost art in regards to scholarship in its high point. And the down and dirty organization, because organization is it's a clean and it's a dirty. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's a clean and it's a dirty. And in order to get certain stuff done, there's a dirty that's necessary. You see what I'm saying? And
Gotta
get
get
things
your hands dirty.
established. And I don't believe you otherwise. You understand what I'm saying? I don't believe you otherwise. I cannot take you serious otherwise. You see what I'm saying? Y'all see this man behind me, the Honorable Marcus Messiah Garvey. If we had a real understanding of who he was and how he got down, a lot of this sucker chump stuff approach, this Millie Mouth,
Oh no.
sit on my hands type of situation that they be trying to ascribe to some of these organizations. I don't even understand that. I don't know them. I never met them. You understand what I'm saying? So, like, it's some real going down. So I'm glad to be able to have taken this sojourn, and I look forward to subsequent conversations. You know what I'm saying? Because Nasik got some some get at. I need some info from my brother. You understand what I'm saying? Because he's an example of a constant force, a constant unifying force. You might get some folks say, "Hey, we down for unification and we down for liberation," until you get to start working. Till you see some things that might dismay your heart. You understand? Some things that might check your chin. To see, some of the evils. You know what I'm saying? Some of the woes, and if that might run you off. And if you ran off, you were supposed to run off. And if you're still there, what the scriptures say, the labor is plenty and the workers is few. You see what I'm saying? The work, so this is that task right here. You see what I'm saying? This is the task, and it's a lifelong task that you signed up for because you're here. You understand what I'm saying? You wouldn't be here at this particular time if this wasn't your task. So, cross organization, cross whatever. You see what I'm saying? This is where you get a chance to see where the goals and the aims and objectives really are, and who's who and what's what. So if it take a pandemic for you to get together, I'm watching you because you wasn't here before. You understand what I'm saying? So if a quarantine got you here, I'm watching you because you wasn't here before. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, so I mean, the creator decide when your heart turned, but I'm looking at your motives. Okay, you see what I'm saying? I'm checking you out because we've been here before. And, too many great things have fallen because of inside and outside agitation.
Teach. Moreh, anything you want to say? I see a comment, and beautiful comments. I just want to make mention to this, and it's not, again, disparaging. I just want to give clarity. And just a perspective to look at it. You can look at it however you feel, but I just want to give another perspective. And I see our brother said that we have to look at the actual mistakes that led to the RICO case. So as we move forward, I presume. And you're absolutely correct. But I want you to look at it two ways. When you are doing something from scratch, when there's no historical record, there's no evidence, no blueprint, no platform that you can draw from on how to create it, you have a certain level of margin of error that you're going to operate in naturally. If you're creating something that has no example preceding it, you're going to have room to make mistakes. Now, we don't have to do what was done leading up to that case in this day and time because we have a greater understanding. We have an example. You're absolutely correct. And we must acknowledge a lot of the dynamics that were in there. But the RICO case did two things. One, we know white people don't operate and their systems don't operate because on truth or what's right and wrong. it operates on how what you're doing affects them negatively. So we talking about a people who murders, kills, rapes, pillage throughout their history and knows nothing else but that. And they do it to this very second. So then it wasn't charging these brothers due to the fact that they felt they were doing something morally incorrect. They were charging them due to the fact that it had ramifications that could bring down their system or their power structure. But again, you have to be in these circumstances if you're saying that you are standing on the square of truth and you represent a God to bring and give you examples of that power. Now, you may not believe in scripture or think, I'm not saying you, I'm just saying anybody I'm speaking to in general, that the story of Moses and the Red Sea and the parting of the sea, or Jonah and the whale, or Daniel and the lions, then the fire, you may not think they actually happened. And you may be true, may not be. However you want to look at it. I'm not getting into that conversation. But when you have verifiable examples in our lifetime that proves the power of God, that proves that there is no circumstance, no situation, no position that you can be in, whether how strenuous or uncomfortable or uncompromising it may be, if you stay on what's right and your intentions and motives are true, you're going to overcome it and be victorious. See, we can only produce what we know, but what is your motives and what's your intention behind what you're doing? See, I can't falsely judge somebody if I don't have the complete and thorough knowledge of what was taking place and what was going on there. So our learning from it is various aspects to it. I'm not necessarily answering that or responding to that question. I'm responding just how we need to go forward from my perspective, based on what I have proven in my life and those who I have studied under. That we assess everything in this totality. We look at it with a fine-tooth comb from an unbiased perspective, but we have to know that you're going to be doing things that sometimes may seem what is not correct or just based on somebody else's society, based on somebody else's perspective. See, right and wrong is based on perspective, based on relativity. What's right for us is not, or the old saying goes, what's good for the goose is not for the gander. We know what's good for them ain't good for us, and what's good for them is definitely not advantageous for us. So our morality has to be centered around the principles, the morals, and the ethics that we govern ourselves by. And that's just truth. I can't judge a person who's poor, who steals a loaf of bread to feed his family, but I can judge a person who steals a loaf of bread when they have abundance of bread or the ability to have bread. Now, you're saying, well, he can work for that bread. You're absolutely correct. But if you've been shut out of the workplace, you've been shut out from opportunities to create bread on your own, you've been shut out from all these various actors, until you can think of a plan to find a way around that, to usurp that, you got to be able to get some substance to even have the capacity and the functionality to think. So as I'm saying these things, that we got to look at this again from every aspect, because we got to be critical in our thinking and our ability to process what took place so that we can intelligently move forward. And again, the things that our fathers, our mothers, and those who came before us, we don't have to do again, ever again, because we got to understand it. But it's certain principles. See, it's certain. I study martial arts, and I know that the technique is immaterial. You try to do a technique in the wrong situation, you kill yourself or get somebody else killed or kill somebody. But if you understand the principles, irregardless of the technique, you can always protect yourself, because you know certain circumstances cause a certain response and certain action. And that's what we got to attach ourselves to. What's the principle of what we're trying to do so that we can elicit the most appropriate response for that particular endeavor. So I just wanted to make mention of that, because I just want to stimulate our thinking a little bit as we go forward, because that's what it's about. It's about having a conversation, and it's about putting them out the front, these things, so that we can discuss them intelligently as we go forward, because we don't want to have to do any of the things that we know was not beneficial or was not needed in that time in this day. Moreh and Nasik?
Oh no, that was excellent, bro. I didn't get the question. It was about. I didn't get the question. I don't see the question.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a question, but he was making a statement. It was right. It was accurate. I was just reading through it. I like to, read as much as I possibly can. It's somewhere in there. But the brother said, we just gotta assess let me go back. But he was talking about the Rico case. You're right. It
Oh, you
is.
talking about 85?
Yeah. Rico case 85.
Yeah, 85 Rico. Oh, okay.
You see it? I can't
So,
see it no more either.
so I heard you go over the Rico case. If nobody, I guess maybe we didn't explain what took
No, we
place.
didn't go into detail, but I didn't want to go into because we'd be all day going into the detail because I wouldn't be able to say one thing and not go into the other thing.
I
You
can
see what I'm
speak on
saying?
that real quickly.
Yeah.
Real quickly, I can speak on that.
Go ahead.
As far as the Rico case,
Tell Ben he should have got the link and he could have came on here.
Yeah. That was Big Kyle. Okay. But for the audience though,
yeah, that Big Kyle, he qualified.
Maybe he just said we didn't expound on it. But what happened was, as I said, we were struggling in the 70s. It was a struggle. We were being an independent community. We were completely dependent on each other.
Mm-hmm.
Brotherhood was basically all we had, brother and sisterhood. And we were trying to be we was trying to use our ingenuity and our wit to try to develop some type of self-sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was, when that ran its course, our international staff resulted to using tactics that they had to, they resulted to using tactics in order to keep the community going. And some of those tactics involve uh, fraud and things of that nature. I'm not going to get into details, but that was what led up to the Rico case. And we don't shy away from anything that we've done as a people for revolution. And I know as a historian, and especially looking at Black history, the major leaders, if they ain't got a Rico case, they ain't did nothing. Facts. So
Teach.
I remember my Abba told me one time. I forgot what the context was, and maybe I think it was the Iraq war when they went in toppled Saddam, and he said, he's like, man, if white man ain't out to get you, you ain't doing nothing. He said, if he ain't coming to get you, guess what? You irrelevant. If he ain't got the FBI, CIA on you, if he ain't trying to get you caught up in nothing, you ain't doing nothing. So, you know, when I look at that history, hey, it was means necessary, like Malcolm said, and we know we don't have to move like that going forward, but I mean, it had to be done. You know, I mean, and what was taking place in the community in the late 70s and early 80s, man, it was rough. I mean, they was sitting here literally. If you hear the stories from the children, man, listen, man, it wasn't no food in the house. They was 20, 30 deep in the room. I mean, they was basically relying on outside resources coming in to keep the community going. And so Prince ICL and international staff, hey man, they did what they had to do. And hey man, I salute them, man. Ain't nothing to talk about with that. So I mean, if there are any more questions, man, I appreciate. If there's not any more questions, I appreciate you, Yosef, and I'm very impressed, man, and how you developed and evolved, man. And I look forward to working with you closely in a lot of different areas, man. And proud of you, bro. Your articulation is is high, bro. And I see I see it in you, bro. You studied, you sat at the feet of the giant, bro, because hey, I know who that giant is, man. I sat at his feet too. And so I see him in you, bro. And you continue on, bro. Don't be discouraged. And I'm be right here. You got me. And anytime, bro, you need me, I'm here, bro. I'm glad I brought you on. I'm glad I linked you up with knowledge. And it's going. I could see us doing some things, bro. And I wanted you to tell knowledge about the business that you had going because I see knowledge is doing programs involving expanding black business, and yeah, so I wanted you to touch on that.
Absolutely. I must say, Brother Knowledge, Kananya is being modest because he has played an instrumental role in my growth and my development. He was my first teacher in Hebrewisms and giving me the understanding of the community and of scripture in general. When I first moved in with my father, about the age of 18, my brother was here because he's married to my sister. He was in Chicago at the time. And I was like a fresh caught fish, just flopping around on top of the deck of the ship, and I didn't know what I was doing or where I was going, but I just know that this felt right, and I wanted to learn more. And Kananya, being a big brother that he is, being a man of integrity that we spoke about earlier, that he has, even at that early age, we're talking about 10, 11 years ago, he took me under his wing and did not at all, and I mean at all, ever lie nor try to deceive me in any form or fashion. And he just gave me the truth. He gave it to me in a manner that I was able to digest it, but he wasn't holding things back either. He told me the reality of things, what had taken place, what he seen, or what he felt the kingdom was going in the direction. And it gave the foundation that allowed me to be, I believe, humbly, the young student and developing myself into the scholar that I'm becoming is due to the fact that Kananya was my teacher, and that was the approach he always took. He always, hey, you got to be able to prove it. You got to be able to cite it. What's your sources? You got to be able to do the research. He said those little things that at the time I was, this Negro crazy. I ain't about to do all that reading and doing all that extra work. But once I matured and understood, I said, God, man, he was preparing me for something greater than I didn't even understand myself. So now when I'm in the room with my father and I'm moving around with him and I'm sitting at the feet of these great men and scholars and intellects and just go-getters, I had a great understanding, and I was able to internalize it with logic and with sense rather than just emotion. And I thank that to my brother. So again, can I absolutely, you kind of started me. It's only fitting that, as we go to this next level, we do it together, because I wouldn't be here, and a lot of this word and a lot of the sense in this position I am now without what you put in me in your tutelage. But brother Knowledge, I've been, so privileged to have the opportunity to be a runner and a owner of vegan restaurant we have here. My brother and sister run our main locations, which was started by, my father, my mother, and the members of the community, Original Soul Vegetarian, which has been there almost 40 years now. But I have an offshoot in the West Loop of Chicago called Vegan Now, which we sell. But the main thing that I want to, that's only for the people in Chicago, I'm saying that. So we have healthy vegan eating. Once this thing lifts, you better come in. There's no seating, so you ain't got to worry about that social distancing. You're able to come in, take your food to go, and it's delicious, warm, tasty, and it has that soul food touch that you love, but without all the bull crap. But I developed as a means to reach another demographic. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear me? Okay. So
Yeah, I can hear you.
okay, perfect. Call, these phones, everything tied in my computer. So call came in. I thought I had it muted and knocked the screen off. I apologize. But as I was saying, we developed a clothing line. And so one of the things that we know, or that I was taught, the three necessities if you want to get into business is food, clothing, shelter. So we did food. We're working on shelter, but I want to jump into clothing. And so I created, because about 2-3 years ago, I got back serious to working out into the health aspect, the physical health aspect, to match the diet. And so I was like, I wanted to create a comfortable but stylish shirt that, and just start off as a t-shirt that I can work out in, but yet I can run errands in, but I don't have to wear or bear the logos of Adidas or Nike or any of those things. And I know for the price that I'm paying that I'm getting inferior material and quality. So I said, I need to make my own t-shirt, at least to work out in, since I'm finding some type of joy and I'm being consistent with it. And that started me on the process of creating what is called Black Royalty. Black Royalty is a clothing line now that I have tracksuits, t-shirts, men and women, that you're able to work out in, run errands when you're not in your culture or if you're not in your suits, but something that you can wear functional that's representative of our mind and our purpose and our goal. So part of what we do is that once the thing really gets going and picks up, percentage of the proceeds go back into not just building a brand, but into the community building, the aspect building. So now we're able to reach various demographics through the clothes, because fashion and clothing is one of the greatest, kind of attention grabbers of our people, especially the younger demographic, so to speak. So they love fashion, they love clothes. So if I can be able to teach, if I'm able to instill this truth by using clothes as an intermediary, I thought that would be a great idea. At the same time, we're able to create the necessary resources to help fund our revolution. So that was kind of the thinking behind Black Royalty. And we have a website that you can go online anytime, blackroyaltywear.com. Black Royalty Wear, Black Royalty, and then wear, wear.com. So you have an Instagram, same thing, Black Royalty Wear, and an email address that you can send me any comments or any suggestions as we go forward.
Yeah, that's exactly because we want to try to set up another show and get supports knowledge and what he's trying to do as far as with the black businesses. So we gotta go ahead and try to book us a show with advertising the black businesses that we got going on, which you not see. So I definitely wanted knowledge to be aware that you just not someone out here trying to preach and talk, that you out here doing the work and setting up businesses and following the footsteps and the giants that led the way.
Yes, sir.
Uh, so yeah, we got to set something up, knowledge. So if aren't any more questions, we're gonna wrap it up. And I appreciate everyone, knowledge, and you yourself for coming on. And it was very enlightening. I think you were very articulate in expressing your views and how you see things. And I'm looking forward to doing something real soon with you again, and putting this history and putting this understanding, bringing it all together.
Thank you so much, brother. It's an honor and a pleasure again to have the opportunity to come on here and to just speak truth to power, and we build, and to be on this illustrious platform of our brother Knowledge, and the great things that he's doing on behalf of our people and uniting us on truth. It's been
Yeah,
a
brother
true honor.
Nasik, if you have that website, you can put that website, and I'll put it up here.
Okay.
So family know where to find that
I
gear.
see you got the chat, but I gotta log in. It's gonna knock me out if I try to log in. But
And look, now we want to set up another show just based on the black business. I know, I know how you dealing with it, and we want to support, and we want you to give us that platform so we can promote some of the businesses we got going on. So even if you're not able to do it, we want to set up something real soon with you to get that black business what we got going on out there.
Oh yeah, I'm here for it. I'm here for it every day, every single day. This
beautiful,
why I'm here. That's part of the mandate. You see what I'm saying? Like this is two halves of the same whole. Like Through the Niles Radio was established to honor our elders, to honor our ancestors, to honor our peer group, and to honor our youth. And the other part was for on and promote themselves. That's the community that I came from. You see what I'm saying? So to do honest to my family, my own bloodline, we supported each other, we promoted each other, and this community, this stuff. So I'm thankful to the creator for that. You understand what I'm saying? But there's still, brothers and sisters that are here that are righteous and doing what's right. You see what I'm saying? So I give them a platform. I give the business, the independent business owners, the mom and pops, the of the program. We ain't just on just to be on.
So I can't wait to do it again, brother. Hello?
I'm here. I think he
Okay.
muted up. I'm here.
Brother Knowledge? He
Yeah, he must
froze
have
off.
dropped out.
Okay.
But I'm gonna fall back, brother Nasik. If you go ahead.
Yeah, it's about I think it's about time. I think he pretty much closed out as well. I gotta
Okay.
get moving.
We in
So
here. Okay. All right, bro. Call me. Call me.
I will. I will.
And we'll set up what we said we was gonna do.
Okay, so I'll call you tomorrow then.
Okay.
All
Cool.
right, beloved.
Live,
Peace and blessings,
live.
listen, audience. Thank you so much. Brother Knowledge again, it's an honor and a pleasure. Are you back, Brother Knowledge? Hello?
All right, family, we out of here. Peace.